Okay, so um, I wanted to talk about something that will show the things that have happened in Nigeria in the three phases of our history. The Nigeria's history is divided into three. Historians look at Nigeria's history in three phases, and they are the pre-colonial era, the colonial era, and the post-colonial era. So I want to examine the tragedies that hit Nigeria, the major three tragedies that has hit Nigeria in the three phases of our history. So you will come with me on that journey. In the pre-colonial era, Nigeria's first big tragedy hit her, and this is what we refer to as the transatlantic slave trade. Slavery by Europeans and Americans was a very big tragedy at the time. So Nigerians were taken by force out of their land, transported to a whole new territory, foreign land. This was very, very humiliating. It was a dehumanizing enterprise that robbed the Nigerian and indeed Africans of their dignity. They robbed humans of their dignity. It's very horrific, very abysmal. But then that was it. The first tragedy that hit Nigeria, the first major big tragedy that hit Nigeria in our history. Then we moved up to the second phase of our history. At this time, the colonial masters had come into play. This was from the second half of the 19th century, with the conquest or the annexation of Lagos in 1862, 1862, down into the 20th, down into the 20th century, from that second half of the 19th century down into the 20th century. There was our second great tragedy, colonialism. So at this time, slavery had ended. The Europeans, the ones that had humanitarian concerns, had worked towards stopping slavery. People like William Wilberforce and the rest. Of course, I know that there were also, people with mercantile reasons, that also propagated the cause for the abortion of that wicked trade called slavery, slave trade. But the fact is that by the middle of the 19th century, slavery to a very large extent had stopped and was not like it was before. It was even one of the reasons places like Lagos was annexed, was conquered. But then, the point is that in the second phase of our history, the colonial era, the second tragedy struck. The second tragedy struck, and that's colonialism. And the thing here is that we were conquered by Europeans, the British. They came in by force, defeated every nation state that existed in the Nigerian territory, from the south to the north, every one of them, such that by 1903, every single nation state in Nigeria had been conquered, be it a centralized state that practiced monarchy like Sokoto Caliphate, Benin Empire, or the more Republican and democratic ones were found in parts of Igbo land and the Niger Delta states. So at this time, they ruled Nigeria, and it was a tragedy because this was a case of foreign invasion, people coming to dominate in your land, conquer you, and rule you in your land, sack your leaders, and assume authority over you. They rule you by force. This happened in Nigeria for the greater part of the colonial history of Nigeria. The colonial era in Nigeria, we were ruled by force, by foreigners, invaded and dictated to as to how we conduct our lives. This was in itself a great tragedy, but it was the second. And it lasted from, I would say that colonialism in its entirety fully started, from the early 1900s. From that time to the time of our liberation, and then it stretched up to the time when we actualized our freedom from the British, which is in 1960. So if you count from, let's say, 1900 to now, that should be 60 years. Or you count from 1914, it should be less than that. But all through that period, we were ruled by foreigners. It was a tragedy because people have the rights to govern themselves. People have the inalienable right to govern themselves. That is why our nationalists stood up and fought for independence, and we got it. So we got our independence from the British in 1960. We were fully independent from the British. But from that time going on forward, unknown to so many Nigerians who really loved the idea of independence, we were just about to step into the greatest tragedy of our history, the worst of it that has ever happened to us. And this tragedy has continued from that time of independence till this day, which is 65 years later. A couple of days ago, this is 1 week after Nigeria clocked 65 years of independence from the British. And for these past 65 years, we have been experiencing the third tragedy of the Nigerian state, which is the greatest. And this tragedy is bad governance. Bad governance. See, I know a lot of people have attributed the failure of the Nigerian state to colonialism. But I will tell you the truth. The effects, the consequence, the effect of bad governance on the Nigerian state is 1,000,000 times worse than the effects of colonialism and slavery put together. It is 10 times worse, it's 1,000,000 times worse than what colonialism and slavery has done to Nigeria. Bad governance is the reason why, even though we got our freedom from the foreigners that invaded and ruled us by force, we have still not been able to conduct our affairs in such a way that the world can look at us and say, oh, we are a nation that have walked into the path of development. For 65 years, we have governed ourselves, but we have not been able to do even the things that our oppressors did that had a semblance of progress and development. It is because of bad governance that critical infrastructures that drive development in any same nation is extremely deficient in our nation today, unlike in the time of colonialism, which we during the time of colonialism, in the era of colonialism, the colonial history of Nigeria had more railways than Nigeria currently has in the time of our freedom from colonialism. That's very crazy. It's very crazy. It's so crazy to think that in the 21st century, when technology has advanced to a very high level, that railways still, rail transport still looks like a heavy rocket science to Nigerian government. Meanwhile, in the colonial era, it was something that the colonizers circled Nigeria with in a very quick manner. They were very quick to circle Nigeria with railways. But while at the time when we are governing ourselves, while at the time we have science and technology very advanced to help us do that, we have not been able to do that. It is because of bad governance. The colonials did what they did, circled Nigeria with railway when the world had not advanced technologically the way it has advanced today. And yet, today, we cannot boast of what our colonizers did to make life easy, to make transport easy. It is crazy, and this is our biggest tragedy: bad governance. And don't look too far to decipher or to discern what bad governance is. Bad governance is simply using wicked systems and structures to control a society. That is what it is. Using wicked systems and structures to control a people. Bad governance is the fact that a government decides to use the revenue, the funds of the state, of a nation, to maintain the welfare of government officials who live extravagant lifestyles and ignore funding critical infrastructures that drive development in the land. That's what bad governance is. So they would willingly pump in huge, very, very huge sum of money that can transfer bad governance. Bad governance is the fact that a select group of people in government decide that they are going to be spending the resources of the nation majorly on two things: the maintenance of their welfare and revenue generation. They use revenue generation to deceive themselves and to deceive world economic bodies so that they can boast that they are generating big GDPs. But the thing is that the revenue, yes, they boast that they are building GDPs, but the GDPs don't get to reflect in the lives of the people because they don't invest into the things that harness the human capital of the people. They don't invest in the transport that will make life better and make society function well. They don't invest in the education that can grow the economy to great heights. They don't invest in the power. The country is literally in the dark. They don't invest in these critical things. They build grandiose infrastructure to generate revenue, and then the other part of the resources they carry it and fund their extravagant, splendiferous lifestyle. And then the lean amounts of money that is left, the ones that are supposed to be thrown to the dogs, that's the one they toss at the critical infrastructures, and nothing happens. These things, the education does not get better, the transport does not get better, nothing gets better, health does not get better, and they are still celebrated. They still expect the people to celebrate them for tossing lean amounts of funds at these critical things when they have wasted the major bulk of the resources on maintaining their welfare and then generating revenue. And they use this generation of revenue to deceive a whole lot of people, because when they are done generating, when an extravagant person generates revenue, they there are no critical reforms made in the constitution that allows election results to be transmitted electronically, that introduce technology into the way elections are conducted. They know it will never be free until these things are done. They know elections will never be free if enough security personnel, soldiers, are not deployed to polling units. They know this. They know elections cannot be free without electronic transmission of results. But they will not create that reform in the law. They will rather leave a law, a constitution that allows the electoral body to transmit results anyhow they like, because they know in doing that the many malpractices that goes on in the electoral process that favors them would continue. That is bad governance. Bad governance has wrecked Nigeria. Bad governance is our biggest tragedy. It is way bigger. It's way devastating than colonialism. It is more devastating than slavery. And that is what we must seek to kill in our society. That is what we must seek to fight. This is the time when Nigerians want to stand up and fight for the liberation of their nation, not from the hands of foreigners, but from the hands of their treacherous brothers and sisters, their fellow citizens, the selected few that has decided to perpetuate bad governance upon the people. Thank you.